Take you back to the United States, Georgia, in Atlanta to be exact, where a press briefing with the electoral officials is set to go underway soon. Ziyanda, how have the first few hours of voting been where you are?
Well, I can tell you, Vuyo, that already some voting stations have recorded, record highs in terms of the voter turnout. You'll know that there were rallies up until the last hour yesterday, which was election eve in Fulton County in Georgia, Atlanta. It's voting day. America will decide. And Georgia, you'll remember, is one of those swing states that's very important for both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. It is highly securitized. Voting stations have been bolstered all around, including this venue where that press briefing will be taking place. So much like what we would have had at home on May the 29th, where we have the IEC briefing us, the same is taking place in this particular state in terms of giving us an update on where we stand. Voting stations here in Georgia opened at 8 o'clock this morning and will close at 6 p.m. So we'll get a status update from those officials. But of course, they are they're on high alert, I should say, especially because of the fake news and the misinformation and disinformation that has been peddled in this region in particular, and not only just in this election by Donald Trump just 2 days ago, basically laying down the foundation for the possibility of electoral fraud and vote rigging, but also because in 2020 he lost by just under 12,000 votes, and he tried many times to have that overturned. In fact, a Fulton County court, which is the area that we're in, found him guilty of trying to interfere with the outcomes of the election here in Georgia. So it's a very important state that we find ourselves in. It will be very important to hear what the turnout is like, but also the dynamic of the demographic is quite interesting. In the more urban areas, you do find Democrats that are diverse, but once you start going into the more far-flung rural areas, that's where you find a lot of the conservatives, and that's why then when you look at the polls for Georgia, Atlanta, you'll see that it's neck and neck, literally a 1 percentage point difference. In fact, Joe Biden only won by 1 percentage point in 2020, and then Donald Trump winning by 3 percentage points, in 2016. So it's one of those regions that are going to be closely monitored. The processes are going to be monitored, and we heard then from an NPO that has been working quite well closely with the electoral process here in Atlanta, Georgia, that they expect to have the counts done. Remember that the early voting closed on Saturday, and those votes had not been opened. So as soon as the voting stations open, that's only when those mail-in and early votes will start to be counted. And they're anticipating that by this evening, all the votes would have been counted. Now, it's also interesting to note that unlike in 2020, with this election, if your vote is not in before the voting station closes, it will not be counted. And so it's going to be quite strict, and I think they've done this to avoid then any possibility of anyone claiming that there's any kind of vote rigging or electoral fraud.
4 years ago, of course, Joe Biden won Georgia. We'll see what happens this time around. Ziyanda Ngcobo in Georgia, Atlanta.